Hey there, and welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. It is great to have you join us. This podcast series features those who have gained victory over a life encounter. With that life experience, we encourage those who are experiencing something that might seem to be insurmountable. We advance and encourage others by passing forward evaluated life experiences. We have three objectives in this podcast series. We want to encourage those who are engaged in any type of life encounter by offering to walk with you to help you gain victory over anything that might seem impossible. We want to share our experience to help you. Our second objective is to help you develop a confident resolve that there are multiple options to get past any life obstacle. It's a matter of thinking into the situation. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are facing a dilemma resulting from a previous decision you wish you could reverse, we want to help you think into all of the facts and factors involved in making an informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business manager, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture Company who is sponsoring this podcast series.
Today we feature Marko Kasic. He is a self-described rebel. I think of that in this context in a very positive way, in that Marko looked at his surroundings and says, I don't like the way things are going. There were non-government officials that were doing things that he could not agree with. So he looked through that and said, I can do better. The 2013 typhoon that hit the Philippine Islands motivated him to want to reach out to younger people, and it was through sports that he devised a way to have a positive impact on those younger than him, a very philanthropic effort that led to the Fund Life organization. And he is doing a great work through that organization, and his thought process of thinking through and having the courage to overcome any naysayers, any obstacles. Marty, what are some takeaways you gained from Marko?
Listening to Marko and his story, which is amazing, you learn he is a purpose-driven person. I asked him if he had a mentor that helped him become that way, and he said, not really. He was just a person that I'm going to do it. He read books on people that wrote their journey and how they overcame and their determination to do and not let any naysayer, like you said, stop them. He did say to the person that is wondering, what do I do? I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to do something for someone else. He said, volunteer in an organization that you feel your purpose is with and help them first. And then if you want to pursue something else along those lines for yourself, that will be a big help to you.
He's on a great journey moving forward. Let's listen and learn together. Marko, it is great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in a brief summary of your background, but also you impressed me as being a very philanthropic kind of person, and I mean that in the context that your greatest satisfaction comes from benefiting others. You've had a lot of life experiences. Curious if you would be willing to briefly summarize some of your life experiences that has led to starting the Fund Life organization. Marko, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Ron and Marty, and excited to share my somewhat unconventional story. Thank you for the kind words. I don't consider myself philanthropic in the traditional sense. I consider myself just somebody who was always hungry to find purpose in terms of the background, perhaps, that led me to where I am. But I was born in former Yugoslavia, which no longer exists. So now it's Croatia. And then my family moved to the UK when I was 6. So from a very early age, I think I had a sense of what it was to be sort of a little bit confused because, growing up, I had to adapt to a new culture, a new language. And at the same time, I saw how difficult it was for my parents. We were young, me and my sister, but my parents were in their mid-30s and they moved to a brand new country and they really started at the bottom. So I kind of saw through my upbringing the harsh realities of life. And I think growing up, I had a very happy, very pleasant childhood after I settled in. But I think I always felt this need to find purpose. So many of my friends didn't get a chance to go to London, didn't get a chance to have an education like I did. And I just felt this obligation almost that I didn't just want to do a 9 to 5, do the conventional route. So I think that's where it came from. And again, everything that's transpired since, all these feelings, has really been very organic, very accidental. So nothing was ever intentional. Like I said, I never had aspirations of doing the things I'm doing now. It's just I followed somewhat of a calling. I felt like I wasn't happy where I was, and I made decisions along the way to move from wherever I wasn't being fulfilled. And eventually, that's how we got to Fund Life and the work that I'm doing now, which I don't regret anything that's happened along the way.
That is a great overview. There are a lot of our listeners who are uncertain of their purpose, finding real, genuine fulfillment in their life. You impress me as being the kind of person who said you've experienced, nope, not this, and not this, until you experience various things in life, until you did eventually find your purpose and your satisfaction. You have what I would believe a traditional job, but you're also working Fund Life. Are you getting equal satisfaction in each, your current job and Fund Life?
I mean, it's not as glamorous as maybe it appears to be. Of course, with Fund Life, we started, I was 24 when I started Fund Life, so I had no experience, no network. It was really just this passion to do something that I felt could make a difference. And then as I sort of evolved, as the organization went from being volunteer-led to being a little bit more sustainable, I think we saw a lot of problems. We saw a lot of deficiencies in the current system of development of NGOs. So to answer your question, I mean, there's definitely fulfillment there, but there's definitely everyday challenges that anyone would have in any role. And for us, although now Fund Life is almost a decade old, we still feel like we're a startup. We still have this mentality that it's kind of us against the world, because I think in the traditional sense, we are disrupting some of the traditional NGOs. And again, we started without the traditional support of a donor or a board of directors. And it was really just working on this idea of what if we just find committed young people that want to make a difference and give them that opportunity. And that's where it snowballed from. So the challenges are daily, the struggle is there, but I think along the way, we've been very, very lucky. I've been lucky that I've come across great supporters, partners, and just an incredible team that is on the ground every day doing the work.
What I'm sensing, what you're saying is you are overcoming some of the traditions. By doing so, you are incurring a lot of worldly life obstacles. But what drives you is the greater good that Fund Life can produce in other people's lives. And because of that greater good, you're willing to work through, think into whatever it's going to take to overcome any of life's obstacles. Does that pretty much describe you?
I would say largely yes. And I think for me, there are many difficult days. There were many more difficult days in the beginning when we started. But I think it's just about having that conviction. Ever since I was young, I knew I had something that I wanted to do. I didn't know what it was. And I think once you have that conviction and once you have that vision, you can overcome. I think a lot of the time people don't have that North Star, or they think they like something, but then as soon as it gets a little bit difficult, they often quit. Everything is exciting when you start it, but then as it gets further down the road, and there's great sayings, people are very good at starting, but very bad at finishing. And so for me, I know where we want to go. I know we're not close to finishing. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So that's the driver mostly.
Marko, I want to ask you, did you have someone in your life when you were growing up that you looked up to and thought, I would like to be like them? Or did you have someone that more or less mentored you through some of the process?
I read a lot of books growing up when I was sort of in college and in university on entrepreneurship. And I think the one thing that stood out from a lot of the entrepreneurs, I remember being extremely moved by Richard Branson's story of how he started Virgin in the UK. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence in terms of going against the grain, not relying on traditional education, on these traditional pathways. But in terms of a mentor, not really. If I'm honest with you, I've always felt like I was a little bit of a rebel without a particular cause until I found something in this development space. The one thing that I didn't agree with when I was reading entrepreneurship books and business books is that everything was derived on profit. It all came back to the bottom line. And then to me, I didn't resonate well. I'm a big believer in doing well, but also doing good. And sort of the more I realized that how business works and working in the corporate sector for 6 months, especially I graduated in the midst of the financial global crash in 2009. So I had this paradoxical experience where personally I was thinking, what's going on? And then professionally, I was working in the investment sector and realizing business as usual is real. Nobody really gives a damn as long as you're hitting your numbers. So again, it just didn't resonate with me. I wasn't satisfied. I was making money, and that also gave me confidence that once I was working in London, I realized I could make money, but it wasn't my driver. And I wasn't afraid to go away for a year or 2 years, try something new, because I always had that safety net. I always felt like I could always do well if that's what I wanted to do, but there was no passion behind the making of money for others.
In hindsight, do you feel you were always born with the rebel spirit, or was it reading the Richard Bransons of the world? I think you also quoted Think and Grow Rich. Was it through the reading of those authors that you said, I can do that and I'll work through whatever? Is it through that reading that inspired you that I will overcome and nobody is going to keep me from getting to the greater good?
I think those were the tipping points. Before that, I felt, like I said, I think this itch that I couldn't scratch was within me. I had these huge anxieties. I remember when I graduated, and there was this common phrase amongst friends and family, just get any job you can, because it was going through this recession. And the one thing that kept on sticking in my head when I was hearing this was, it's not an easy decision. If I'm going to work somewhere for 40 years of my life or 50 years of my life, I think I'm not ready for that decision. So there was this huge anxiety about choosing your destination when you have no idea what you want to do. So no, I've always had something within me, whether it was because of the displaced childhood, whether it's because I had a chip on my shoulder. And also, don't forget, when I was sort of in my formative years, in my teens, that was around the time the US and the UK had that war against Iraq. And I was one of the people protesting against it, especially the UK's role. So I felt, growing up, I didn't trust power. I had this sort of sense that power was working against the wishes of young people. So there was always this rebellious side. Where it came from, I don't know. But certainly I would say the books and the influences, that just gave me the final push to try something.
But I think that's a great spirit to have when it's used in the right direction, that I can do better than the system around me. I don't agree with the decisions of some people. When you have in mind and your life is based on values, principles, you will work away. You'll think into how to overcome whatever seems to be the growing trend to maybe do something different. To some, you're going to seem to be a rebel, but then to others who will say of you, Marko, no, you've got the entrepreneurial spirit. You'll think through, you will determine how to do and get where you want to be. And by golly, you'll overcome any obstacle you face. That's what I hear you saying.
Actually, when you put it like that, that's actually one of the key takes away from Think and Grow Rich, because there's a chapter dedicated in that book to the naysayers. And there's a great saying by, I think it's a Japanese philosophy that says, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So I think that's something that reading the books, you kind of don't anticipate, because you always have this sense that people will support you. If you're trying to do something that potentially would benefit others, there would be support behind you. But I think quickly, as you realize when you're trying to go against the grain, when you're trying to somehow intercept the natural order of things, people often don't react in a positive way. But again, I think it's just about having that conviction. I think, just being steadfast, and if you're doing something that ultimately you think is good for others, I think that makes it easier. And I hope, we will see, we're still early in our journey, but I hope, looking back, that the work that Fund Life has done, the sort of trajectory that we're trying to promote, this idea of empowering others, this idea of self-determination for young people, hopefully it's something that won't be such an anomaly in 10, 20 years from now.
Marty and I fully agree with you. Talk to us a little bit about conviction. Can you define your conviction? Can you tell us how you develop that? Our listeners need to know conviction. That would seem to be one of the driving forces. A conviction is totally different from a preference. Preference means I'll try it today, but I may change tomorrow. Conviction says that's who I am. I will always stay by that. Can you define how you came about a conviction? Maybe even define that conviction for our listeners?
I don't know if I can define it. I can try and give a metaphor that kind of describes my way of thinking. I read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Again, a pretty good book to read. And one of the key takes away from that book is don't burn your bridges. Always be complimentary to others, always look favorably. But then I think conviction is the opposite of that. I think conviction is about knowing where you want to go and be willing to burn every bridge so you don't go back. I think too often we're too afraid to take a road and then not have a bridge to come back if it doesn't work out. And I think for me, as I said, I went completely all in. I moved to the Philippines. I found something that I wanted to pursue. And again, no matter how difficult it gets, no matter how often I want to quit, no matter how tired I am, I can sleep. The next day, I feel as if I want to go again. And I think I would recommend, if anyone is struggling with, finding conviction, I mean, there are some amazing icons, Mandela, Martin Luther King. There's a fantastic book about the last year of Martin Luther King. I mean, all of his close circle turned against him. And he had, that to me is the ultimate definition of conviction, just still being resolute to what you believe in. Gandhi, again, when you talk about sort of global icons that had conviction in what they believed in. So I think there are far better people in history who are examples of conviction, but ultimately it's having that courage. I don't know where you find the courage from. It's different to different people. For me, it was easy. If I'm honest, I have friends who didn't make it out of former Yugoslavia, who died. So I think for me, every day I wake up, I feel grateful that I can do something. I can live, I can run, I can breathe. And so the idea of going to an office to do something I don't like, I almost feel that that's giving up on life for me. But again, not everyone has that conviction. So whatever moves you, whether it's a family member or something, and again, reading a lot of books typically tends to be the common thread is some kind of setback. Most people find their conviction when they hit rock bottom or at the intersection of despair. So it doesn't have to be that, but I think it's very personal, I think. But just look within yourself. That would be my advice, and just be resolute to what you believe in.
Several takeaways I have from what you said. You were born in Yugoslavia, now Croatia, and you saw things you didn't like. There was a part of your background you chose to leave behind. I use that term, chain breaker. You're not going to take forward some of the negative in which your life experienced. You had the desire to move out on convictions. You wanted to find those with whom you could align. You did with those you mentioned, Richard Branson, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and others. And you said, I want to read more about them. I want to learn about them. And I sense you're saying you had a natural affinity or a growing affinity with them. and you became like them. You developed the courage to do what you found to be very satisfying to you. And for any naysayers, you're not going to listen to them. You're not going to totally separate yourself from them, but you're not going to align yourself such that they're going to influence you in a way that would distract you from achieving the greater good. That's part of what I'm reading into your life experiences, Marko.
I wouldn't go as far as saying I think I'm like some of the people you quoted, but yes, I took courage from their courage. I think that's what had me going. And again, I've always sort of look back at what's the worst case scenario of things not working out. And the worst case scenario is never bad enough that would stop me from doing it. So that's always been, I guess, my mindset of whatever I'm doing, it's never as bad as not doing it.
I want to ask you about your GoFund. What is this all about? What do you do through your business?
So Fund Life started as a not-for-profit in the Philippines. It was in response to the world's biggest typhoon, which hit the Philippines in 2013. We were limited in terms of what we could do because we're a small organization, but effectively we use sports as a vehicle to connect with highly marginalized, highly vulnerable, and children from poverty as a way to really make them feel as equals, raise their aspirations, raise their confidence, because coming to the Philippines, it was the first time that I saw this global inequality on such a huge scale, where you saw five-star hotels, crazy abundance, hotels, malls, and then side by side, you have children living in the slum. For me, I felt compelled to do something. And then through sports, we found an amazing tool to actually work with these children in a dignified way, where we're not teaching them dependency, we're not giving handouts, but we're actually teaching them positive values, the value of hard work, the actual ability to believe in themselves. So it's a very organic way of building up their self-esteem, but also actually using sports to provide scholarships for education and also life skills. And that was the cornerstone of Fund Life's work. Since then, we've evolved to doing a lot of employability training, employability skills, sexual reproductive health for vulnerable girls, because teenage pregnancy is a huge problem in the Philippines. It affects the poorest and the most vulnerable girls. When they become pregnant, they have to drop out of school. There's a lot of single mothers. There's a raft of poverty factors which we work to address. But fundamentally, it's all rooted in community-led, youth-first solutions. It's never top-down. It's never me going into the community or an expert coming in. Everything is from the ground up. So that's what Fund Life does. And then I'm also a social impact consultant. So I work with businesses to try and get them to actually, as I mentioned, not just focus on the shareholder value, but look at how they're affecting stakeholders. And CSR, ESG, these are all terms that we sort of work to address with business owners and business leaders.
What can inspire you to a call to action? You may see something around you that causes you to think, we can do better than this. You may see some people who are underprivileged. You may see some inequities in processes, systems, the way things are that left alone would be status quo, and you think, we can do better than this. In Marko's case, the 2013 typhoon caused him to think into the various inequities that exist in the Philippines, and his thoughts were, we can do better. How can he be a catalyst to make the environment better, to advance people, to close the gap between the inequities he saw? His heart desire was to advance people, and it still is that, to advance people. What can inspire you to a call to action? I want to encourage each one of us listening to this message to think about our surroundings. What can we do to make things and people better? It seems, and what I'm taking for what you're saying, a lot of people experience devastation from the typhoon. How can I restore myself? My home is gone, and I have almost lost a life purpose. and you thought into and through that, and it's, gosh, a novel idea. Sports. Can we use sports to help people develop a healthy self-esteem? Can we help develop courage? Can we help develop a positive outlook in people? And you said, yes, we can. I sense you said, okay, now we just need to figure out how to do this. We can't do this alone. We need sponsors. We need an outreach, and we need people. It takes all this to have it happen. It seems, Marko, you were the thought leader in bringing all this about. I want to applaud you on behalf of our listeners for taking this on. And I feel certain you never thought this is too big a challenge, because the greater good can be achieved. And you're thinking about the younger people in your life who will benefit from your work. Let's take it on, because the greater benefit is what motivates me to overcome obstacles in life.
Maybe, I don't know. I've never stopped to think about it. I think sometimes I'm just a masochist. So sometimes I look at the hardest thing I could do. And, there's a quote I like which says, most people naturally take the path of least resistance. And I've always felt to build character, to build resiliency. I always say that, when I leave Fund Life, or when Fund Life is in a good enough place where I no longer have to be there, everything else I do after that will be comparatively easy. While I have the drive, while I have the will to fight, I'm still passionate about what I believe in. I think our world, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, it's more fragmented than it's ever been. I think today's generation is growing up. As I mentioned, I grew up not trusting power. I think the amount of information we have today and what the youth are experiencing, there's even more distrust amongst political leaders, amongst business leaders. So I think we all have a duty. And I think often, unfortunately, we live in a world full of distractions. So now it's harder than ever to still be consumed by the bigger picture. But I think it's necessary for us in this age of smart technology, almost not to allow ourselves to be stupid to what's happening. And I think I'm very aware of the bigger picture. As I said, unfortunately, I was affected in a way that maybe many people aren't when they're young. So I think if we're not careful, and if we don't hold our political and elected leaders to account, there's a danger certain things, can develop. So again, I think I'm passionate just about trying to do something positive, and also making sure that the people are being heard. I think that's something that often we're not very good at making sure of. There's a lot of there's a lot of noise, but then the bigger picture is happening in the background that a lot of people are not aware of.
That is very well said. For the listener who resonates with what you're saying, they agree with, but they don't feel they have the courage to think through, to work against the naysayers and so forth, how would you encourage that person to say, you can do it? How would you encourage that person to say, you can overcome? What do they need to do based on your experience? Because I think, Marko, you can inspire a lot of people with what you have done and what you're going to do.
I think it's advice that maybe I would give to myself 10 years ago. I think sometimes trying to do something by yourself, it's not the easiest thing, and it's definitely not the smartest. I would encourage someone who feels passionate about whatever they're passionate about to find somebody, find a organization, find a particular person within that organization, and just volunteer to help that person. Almost try and find a mentor in an organization or for a cause that you believe in, especially if you're drawn towards this kind of work, development work, NGO work. A lot of these organizations are phenomenal. They have amazing people and they need help. So just volunteer your services and learn by volunteering. That's how I started. When you were talking about, me being the thought leader, I started Fund Life by volunteering for an organization working in the slums. And what I found was that it was all volunteers. And that blew my mind, because I saw the impact they were having, and they didn't receive a single dollar from any kind of aid agency, any kind of UNICEF office. And I just thought to myself, this doesn't make sense. how can an organization be having such a fundamental impact on the ground and nobody is helping them? So I volunteered my time in business development. I did proposals. I tried to get them through the door. And so that would be my advice. You don't have to go from 0 to 100. You don't have to go to leading an organization. Just simply put yourself in an environment where you feel that your best work or your passion is being fulfilled.
What I'm sensing also is it is a matter of determining what brings satisfaction to you. That is, defining and knowing who you are. Align yourself with others who have similar values, and together, a very operative term for Marty and me, together we can accomplish a lot of good things, even if the naysayers are out there and they're all over. But when I'm determining to fulfill my passion, I know my life values, I have a support team, we will work through the greater good, and it's all a journey. None of this happens quickly, and we have to be willing to develop the courage to move forward. Is that pretty much the same thing as what you said, maybe in a little bit different words?
No, exactly. I think, as you said it's finding your mastermind, or it's finding your small group, or even being alone. I think in today's world, we're afraid of being alone. We're so distracted. As I said, I'm noticing I don't see many books when people are in coffee shops anymore. We're so distracted by our phones. We don't like solitude. And for me, isolation is a gift. It gives me, I run every day, and that's almost my favorite part of the day, because for 30 to 45 minutes, I'm just alone with my thoughts, and that's my way of processing, meditating. And I encourage anyone just to spend time alone if they're not sure, especially because so many people, I often hear, they don't know what their passion is. And I understand, but sometimes, you need to spend time alone. It's not going to happen by going out and listening to other people. You need to listen to yourself.
Isolation for some people can be very negative. If you're depressed, you want to get away from and you withdraw from. For you, what I'm hearing, isolation to you is thinking time. It is a matter of reassessing where I've been, where I'm going. I just need time to think about this, think through. And the isolation, and I think what I'm hearing you say is your method of isolating is to remove yourself from distractions so you can clearly think into where you're going, what you're doing. Is that, at least in part, how you might define isolation in your context?
It is, but only recently. I've also been to some very dark places. I've battled with depression, especially when I was a lot younger, when I was going through this angst. I used the word angst. That's a lot of time alone and questioning and depressed and not wanting to do anything. So I've been there, and I know the negative sides of being alone. And I encourage anyone just to overcome, and it's not easy, but eventually, I think there's a great quote which talks about, the price of regret. Pain is temporary, regret is forever. That for me was always something of fighting through that pain. But listen, life is by no means easy. I think everyone is facing different challenges, whether it's health, whether it's personal. Again, I'm very conscious of telling people what to do, but from my experiences, I think sometimes you have to go to those dark places and embrace them to get to the other side. As you know, the night is darkest before the sun comes up. And I think once the sun does come up, it's really an amazing feeling that I encourage anyone just to try and get there, because it's something that for me, I wouldn't trade for all the security, for all the finances. Just the idea of being true to who I think I am as a person, or what I stand for, that's something that I right now don't want to compromise on.
Great quote. Pain is temporary, regret can be permanent. Marko, you are a great inspiration to others who are going through various forms of life obstacles. I call you a consummate chain breaker. You're not going to carry forward any of the negatives you've been through, but rather you're thinking into the positives. How can you benefit somebody? You'll go through whatever pain you need to go through. With that inspiration, you are inspiring others to overcome, to achieve that greater good. On behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for sharing your life experience, for inspiring others to achieve that greater good. You may be part of the 2, 3, 4%, whatever. It is a life journey, and we will think through and achieve the greater good. Marko, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Marty, for having me, and pleasure. And thank you for all that you do also. Without saying, the platform you give and your listeners can benefit from this. So thank you for being part of that process.
Thank you. We look forward to following your life journey to even greater things. Are you engaged in an activity, a pursuit? Are you working toward a goal that is wholly satisfying to you, a pursuit that is aligned with your talents, your gifts? You're pursuing something that is wholly satisfying to you. It is a pursuit of something in the greater good of. You may be something like Marko, that you're observing something and you can think through and think into the situation, that process, this situation, this culture, the environment, whatever can be improved. We can do better than this. I want to take this on. You may have a bit of a rebel spirit, if I could call it that says, I just feel I can make this better. I can do something better for people. I don't like what I see in being this is a greater cause I would like to pursue. There are some times you say, yes, I've thought about that, but I just don't feel I have the perseverance, the courage, whatever to pursue. For Marko, he got that courage through books. He did get the courage through other people, but those people he learned through reading books. I want to encourage you to think through what provides total satisfaction to you. What are your gifts, your talents? What are you good at? And then find people. It may be through books where you read about others who have accomplished the seeming very difficult, almost impossible to do, or surround yourself with a support group, those who inspire you to achieve what even you may think, I'm not certain I can do this. But when you are surrounded with people who believe in you, who know you, who want to encourage you, you will achieve those things that seem to be out of reach. You will critically think into the strategy required to make the greater good happen. I want to encourage you to find those people who will inspire you to that greater good. Sometimes we have limiting beliefs that hold us back, that says, I've failed at a lot of things and I don't know that I can do this. Coaching. Everyone can benefit from coaching. Marty and I are being coached. Marty and I are certified life coaches through the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. Coaching can help us overcome limiting beliefs. I have overcome several limiting beliefs for my life. When we learn to manage those limiting beliefs, we can achieve those things that are within our sphere of influence, those things that are within our grasp. I want to encourage you to contact us. Let's schedule a 30-minute complimentary demonstration of coaching and how it can benefit you. Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, @thecooperculture.com to schedule a complimentary coaching session, and we can demonstrate how we can help you overcome to be the very best God has created you to be. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating with this podcast series. We hope you will want to share this podcast with your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn connections, your Instagram and Twitter communities. The more we share, the greater the opportunities we'll have to garner ideas from others, advance others, and overcome any limiting beliefs we may have to benefit others. We hope we also have the opportunity to speak with your group to share our life experiences. You can contact me at espeakersplural.com and search for Ron Cooper, F4 Pilot. I look forward to getting with your group to share life experiences to benefit others and help us all to become the greatest that God has created us to be, to benefit others. We look forward to working with you.